On the outskirts of a bustling star system, nestled among the lesser-known trade routes, the cargo ship Sovereign's Drift floated silently through space. It was a patchwork of panels and makeshift repairs, testimony to its decades of service and countless encounters. The crew, a diverse assembly of species from various planets, were mostly asleep, save for the lone night shift that kept the ship humming along its course. In the medical bay, a soft hum of machinery filled the room, lit only by the dim glow of monitors. Dr. Elias Harrow, the ship's human medic, was reviewing inventory lists when an urgent alarm blared through his comm device. Startled, he tapped the device, his brow furrowing as the captain's voice, strained and urgent, filled his ear. "Doc, you're needed in the docking bay now. We've got an emergency. A stowaway, likely a refugee, and she's in bad shape." Elias was on his feet in an instant, grabbing his medical kit. The corridors were quiet as he made his way to the docking bay, the soft clink of his tools echoing in the empty space. When he arrived, the scene was one of controlled chaos. The crew had gathered around a small figure slumped against the cargo containers. She was clearly not human. Her skin shimmered with a subtle iridescence, a common trait among the Yalari, a species known for their bioluminescent qualities. Her breaths were shallow, and dark bruises mottled her visible skin, suggesting rough handling or worse. Her clothing was torn, and she clutched her side in obvious pain. The captain, a grizzled ganter with tusks protruding from his lower jaw, looked up as Elias approached. "She just appeared out of nowhere," he explained gruffly. "Hid aboard a supply crate from Thalax Prime. Must have been there for days." Elias knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Hey there, I'm Dr. Harrow. I'm here to help you." The girl's eyes flickered open, glowing faintly with a light blue hue, filled with wariness and pain. Speaking slowly, using the galactic standard, Elias tried again. "Can you tell me where it hurts?" After a pause, she whispered, her voice a soft musical tone that resonated slightly. "My side. And my head." As Elias conducted his examination, he noted several injuries: a likely rib fracture, dehydration, and malnutrition. He administered pain relief and a hydration serum, his hands steady and sure. The crew watched in silence, a mix of curiosity and concern in their eyes. "Why would no one help her before?" one of the younger crew members asked, unable to hide his distress. "It's not uncommon," Elias responded without looking up from his patient. "Space is vast, and not all are willing to extend help to a stranger, especially from another species. But here, on this ship, we help anyone in need." Once stable, Elias gently helped her up, intending to move her to the medical bay for further treatment. She leaned heavily against him, her body frail yet emanating a quiet strength. "What's your name?" he asked as they walked slowly through the corridor. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and fear. "Myra," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Well, Myra, you're safe now. Let's get you fixed up," Elias assured her, a protective tone in his voice. As they reached the medical bay, Elias couldn't help but wonder about Myra's story. What had driven her to hide in a cargo crate, and who had inflicted such injuries on her? One thing was clear: her life had changed the moment she stumbled upon the Sovereign's Drift, and perhaps so had his. As Myra settled into the confines of the medical bay, the cold, sterile environment gradually became less intimidating under Elias's care. He watched her with a practiced eye, noting how the faint luminescence of her skin grew stronger as her health improved, a sign of recovery in her species. The silence between them was comfortable, filled only with the soft beeping of machines and Elias's occasional low-toned queries about her comfort and pain levels. Over the next few days, Myra began to open up. Her story unfolded in fragments. She spoke of her home planet, Iyara, now ravaged by interstellar conflict. The Yalari, once a peaceful people, had found themselves caught between the advancing frontiers of two expanding empires. Myra had fled after her family was caught in a devastating strike that left her the sole survivor. Elias listened, his expression a mask of professional concern, but his eyes betrayed a deeper empathy. He shared tidbits of his own life in return, The years spent traveling from one star system to another, the many faces he had seen in the medical bay, and the stories that haunted him. It was an exchange of trust, built within the sterile, impersonal walls of the ship's medical facility. The crew of the Sovereign's Drift also grew accustomed to Myra's presence. They offered her smiles and nods, gestures of solidarity from those who too had known loss and hardship in the void of space. Myra, in her own subtle way, began to contribute, assisting Elias with minor tasks, her dexterity and quick learning proving useful. One day, while sorting through medical supplies, Myra paused, holding a vial of bioluminescent enhancer, a common treatment for her people. "You have many things from Iara," she observed, her voice tinged with a mix of surprise and nostalgia. Elias, labeling a shelf, turned to her with a nod. "We try to be prepared for every eventuality," he explained. "Space doesn't care where you're from. It's our job to care instead." As they worked, an alert sounded through the ship. Elias tensed, immediately checking his communicator. "We've got a ship approaching, unidentified, not broadcasting any codes. Looks like trouble," he muttered, more to himself than to Myra. The atmosphere shifted. The previous calm of the medical bay was replaced by a palpable tension. Elias looked at Myra, his decision clear. "Stay here, lock the door, and don't open it unless you hear my voice. Can you do that?" Myra nodded, her expression firm. "I can." Elias moved swiftly toward the bridge, leaving Myra alone. She listened to the fading footsteps, her mind racing. The vial in her hand seemed to glow brighter, a beacon in the growing dimness of the room. Outside, the crew prepared for what might come. On the bridge, Elias stood beside the captain, watching as the approaching ship grew larger on the display. It was a raider vessel, its intentions undoubtedly hostile. The Sovereign's Drift was not a warship, but it was not defenseless either. "We might have to fight," the captain declared, his voice resolute. Elias nodded, his thoughts on Myra. He had promised her safety, a promise he intended to keep. As the raider ship drew near, readying its weapons, Elias prepared for the possibility that this encounter might change everything once again. The tension on the bridge of the Sovereign's Drift was palpable, as the unidentified ship loomed closer, its sleek and menacing hull cutting through the vacuum of space. The crew members stationed themselves at their posts, each movement precise and deliberate, their faces set with grim determination. The captain issued commands in a low, steady voice, coordinating with his team to maneuver their ship into a defensive position. Elias stood behind, his usual calm demeanor overshadowed by a tightness around his eyes. His hand hovered near the medical emergency panel, ready to assist any crew member who might need immediate attention during the encounter. "Initiate communication," the captain barked, his eyes fixed on the screen displaying the approaching raider. A tense moment passed as they waited for a response, the only sounds the soft hum of the ship and the distant clinks of readying weaponry. The raider's response crackled through the communication system, their voice harsh and demanding. "Hand over your cargo and any valuable tech. Do this, and you and your crew may go unharmed." The captain's tusks clenched visibly. "We are a civilian vessel with no valuable cargo worth your effort. I advise you to move along," he countered, his voice a controlled growl. Elias watched as negotiations quickly soured. The raiders' intent was clear as they cut communications, signaling an imminent attack. The ship shuddered slightly under the strain of evasive maneuvers, and Elias's concern deepened, not just for the physical well-being of the crew, but for Myra, hidden away in the medical bay. Her safety, his responsibility. Back in the medical bay, Myra listened to the distant sounds of activity, her anxiety mounting. She had locked the door as Elias instructed, but the sense of isolation and the looming threat magnified her fears. Her fingers wrapped tightly around the bioluminescent vial, the light within pulsing like a heartbeat. The light seemed to offer comfort, a reminder of her home, even as the walls around her felt like they were closing in. Suddenly, a violent tremor rocked the ship, throwing her against the wall. Pain shot through her as she crumpled to the floor, the vial rolling away from her grasp. Scrambling to her feet, she moved to the small porthole, peering out into the abyss of space where the dance of deadly ships unfolded. The Sovereign's Drift was not equipped for battle. But its crew was resourceful, managing to dodge and weave through the raiders' attacks with surprising agility. Another shudder, less violent this time, indicated the ship had managed to land a hit against the raider. On the bridge, the captain and Elias shared a quick glance. The situation was desperate, but there was a sliver of hope. They had managed to disrupt the raiders' targeting systems, buying themselves some time. "We need to keep them at bay until we can jump to hyperspace," the captain declared, turning to his crew. "All power to engines and shields." Elias felt a surge of adrenaline. He needed to check on Myra, ensure she was safe. He excused himself from the bridge, racing through the corridors back to the medical bay. As he approached, he called out, reassuring her through the locked door, his voice a steady presence amid the chaos. "Myra, it's me, Elias. Are you all right?" Her voice, shaky but intact. The Sovereign's drift vibrated with the hum of its overtaxed engines, the ship's hull groaning under the stress of rapid maneuvering and the occasional impact from the raiders' desperate attacks. On the bridge, the captain's commands flew fast and fierce, a steady stream that guided his crew with precision and urgency. Elias, having returned to Myra's side in the medical bay, monitored the situation through his communicator, his expression taut with concern. "Status report," the captain's voice crackled over the comm. "Engine room, are we ready to make the jump?" A terse reply came back, the engineer's voice laced with strain. "Almost there, Captain. We need just a few more minutes to stabilize the core." In the medical bay, Myra sat on one of the beds, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on Elias. "What happens if they catch us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "They won't. We're going to make that jump and we'll be out of their reach." His confidence was more for her benefit than his own. Deep down, the uncertainty gnawed at him. The ship shuddered violently, a direct hit that sent tremors through the floor. Warning alarms blared, red lights flashing as the ship teetered on the brink of disaster. Elias quickly checked the medical monitors, ensuring that the systems were still operational. "Hold on, Myra. It's going to be rough, but I promise we'll get through this." Outside, the raider ship unleashed a barrage of fire, determined to cripple the Sovereign's drift before it could escape. The captain maneuvered deftly, but options were dwindling. The raider was relentless. "Engineering, we need that jump now!" the captain bellowed into the comm. "Ready, Captain! Initiating jump sequence!" came the reply, a mix of relief and tension. The ship's engines whined, a high-pitched crescendo that filled every corner of the vessel. Elias braced himself against the wall, his other hand gripping Myra's tightly. The fabric of space seemed to warp around them, the stars stretching into lines as the hyperspace engines engaged. With a sudden lurch, the ship jumped, the stars snapping back into place as they entered the hyperspace tunnel. The raiders' attacks ceased, their target now beyond reach. Silence fell over the Sovereign's drift, broken only by the heavy breaths of its crew and passengers. "We did it," Elias breathed out, a smile breaking through his anxious facade. Myra looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. "How long until we're safe?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "We'll stay in hyperspace until we reach the next system. Once we're there, we'll figure out our next steps," Elias explained, his mind already racing with plans for their arrival. The ship settled into a steady hum, the immediate threat gone but the journey far from over. Elias took a moment to tend to Miara's earlier injuries, his professional demeanor back as if the crisis had merely been a disruption in his routine. As he worked, his thoughts wandered to the broader implications of their escape. Myra, watching him work, felt a newfound sense of safety, tempered with the reality of her situation. She was far from home, surrounded by strangers. Yet in this small, confined space with Elias, she felt an unexpected sense of belonging. The Sovereign's drift was more than a ship now. It was a sanctuary, a beacon of hope in the vast, uncaring expanse of space. As the Sovereign's drift sped through hyperspace, its interior was a hive of activity. Crew members moved with purpose, repairing damage and checking systems, their faces etched with the exhaustion of the ordeal, yet relieved by their narrow escape. The captain stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the swirling tunnel of light outside, his mind on the coordinates that would lead them to safety, and perhaps to new challenges. In the medical bay, Elias continued his work, stitching the fabric of safety and health with each treatment and checkup. Myra assisted him, her natural agility and quick understanding making her an adept helper. Her presence had become a comforting constant for Elias, her curiosity about medical procedures and her keen insight bringing a new perspective to his work. "Will we be pursued again?" Myra asked as she handed Elias a medical scanner. "It's possible," Elias admitted, his voice low. "But the captain knows these routes well. He's taking us through less traveled paths, areas where our pursuers will find it difficult to follow." Myra nodded, processing this information. "And after? What happens when we arrive?" "We'll have to find you a safe place," Elias said, meeting her gaze. "Somewhere you can start anew, perhaps even connect with others from your species if they're around." The idea seemed to comfort Myra, yet a shadow of doubt lingered. "I don't want to cause more trouble for you or the crew," she said quietly. Elias smiled reassuringly. "You're not trouble, Myra. Helping you is our choice, and it's the right one." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden deceleration, the familiar feel of exiting hyperspace. The starfield outside stabilized into the normal view of space, dotted with distant suns and planets. The captain's voice came over the comm, calling all hands to prepare for arrival. "We're coming into the Farron system," he announced. "It's not heavily patrolled, which should give us some breathing room to make repairs and plan our next move." Elias and Myra exchanged a glance, understanding the gravity of their situation. With the ship in need of repair and potential danger still looming, every decision now was critical. The Sovereign's Drift navigated towards a small space station orbiting a quiet planet on the outer edges of the system. The station was a modest facility, but it was well equipped for repairs and resupply. As they docked, the crew's tension eased slightly, the immediate safety of the station providing a temporary relief. Elias took Myra on a tour of the station, explaining the various sectors and their purposes. The market, the communal areas, and the repair docks all bustled with a variety of species and ships. Myra was particularly fascinated by the diversity of life forms, each with their own stories and paths that had brought them here. "This place is like a crossroads," Elias explained. "People come here to trade, to hide, or to find work. It's a place of new beginnings of sorts." As they walked, Elias noticed Myra's fascination with the different alien species. Her fear had subsided, replaced by a curious and eager desire to learn more about this galaxy that was now her refuge. Returning to the ship, they found the captain speaking with a group of engineers, planning the necessary repairs. Elias and Myra approached, ready to contribute to the discussion. "We'll need at least a couple of days here," the captain said, noticing them. "That gives us some time to think about our next steps, and how best to ensure Myra's safety." As the crew dispersed to attend to their tasks, the days at the Farron System space station passed in a blur of activity. Crew members and hired technicians swarmed over the Sovereign's Drift, patching hull breaches, recalibrating systems, and reinforcing the ship's defenses. Elias divided his time between assisting in the repairs and ensuring that Myra and the crew maintained their health amid the hustle. Myra, growing ever more confident, took to the station with a keen interest, absorbing the languages and customs of the various species she encountered. Her ability to adapt and learn quickly didn't go unnoticed by the station's inhabitants, nor by the crew of the Sovereign's Drift, who had come to accept her as one of their own. One evening, as the station's artificial sunset colored the viewport a deep orange, Elias found Myra looking out towards the docking bays. "Thinking about the future?" he asked, joining her side. "Yes," Myra replied, her tone mixed with hope and uncertainty. "I wonder where I'll fit in all this. I can't stay on the ship forever." "You could," Elias said with a small smile. "You've become invaluable to us. But you're right. You should choose your path freely." His voice held a note of sincerity and respect for her journey. Their conversation was interrupted by the captain, who approached with a sense of purpose. "Myra, Elias, we've got news," he said. "While you were out making friends, I've been talking to some old contacts. There's a colony in the Outer Rim, A place where refugees and survivors from various conflicts come together. It's safe, and they're open to new residents, especially someone with your abilities, Myra." Myra listened intently, her eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. "A colony?" she echoed, considering the possibility of finding a place where she could belong. "Yes, and there's more," the captain continued. "They're in need of medical expertise, Elias. They've got the facilities but lack qualified professionals. It's a growing community. You'd both be a great help there." Elias looked at Myra, gauging her reaction. The idea of setting up a new life on a distant colony was daunting, but it was a chance for a fresh start, a chance to make a real difference. "I think it's worth considering," Elias said. "We can help build something, make a real home." Myra nodded slowly, a smile beginning to form. "It sounds like a place where both of us could start anew." Preparations began immediately. The captain negotiated passage to the Outer Rim, using some of the credits they'd earned from their cargo deliveries. Elias and Myra packed their belongings, which were few but filled with memories of their time aboard the Sovereign's Drift. As the ship made ready to leave the station, the crew gathered to say their goodbyes. Each person, from the engineers to the pilots, had come to respect and admire Myra's resilience and Elias's dedication. With the stars beckoning, the Sovereign's Drift departed from the Farron system, its engines humming softly as it carved a path through the cosmos. Myra stood beside Elias, watching the space station shrink against the backdrop of the infinite universe. "Are you ready for this?" Elias asked, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. Myra looked up at him, her face illuminated by the glow of distant stars. "With you and the crew by my side, I'm ready for anything." Together, they turned their gazes forward, toward the Outer Rim and the promise of a new beginning. The vast expanse of space, once a tapestry of threats and darkness, now lay before them filled with the light of possibilities and the warmth of newfound alliances.